All right, do we see? All right, so now he's in under David. He's in the chat. Let me invite you now. Invite as speaker. See if that works. You should have just gotten an invite to speak.
There it is. Hold on. Let me turn this off. Can you still hear me now?
Yes, we can, sir.
Okay. I'm on my phone. It seems like the only access I can get is from my phone. So let me just get my earbud. I'm going to get earbuds so it won't be so crappy, but I might have to go ask my daughter.
you actually sound fine. For whatever, well, we didn't know this till now, but Podbean actually operates much better just using a phone. I installed it on my computer, which was actually a pain in the butt. But yeah, I should have definitely mentioned that to you. You sound fine. If you want to get headphones or a Bluetooth, feel free to do that.
I'm going to see if I can't find. I might not even be. And otherwise, I'll just go into a room and keep it relatively quiet.
Yeah, you sound
great. Right, just whatever you're doing.
So you sound great now, but whatever you want to do.
You know what? I'll just go back into my room now, and I'll forget about it. I think I've got enough juice in my iPhone. My only concern is it might pick up the kids' noise more than it should, but whatever. You might have got two other people's kids in my house here. Okay, let's just do it.
There they are. All right. So what I'm going to do is here just for us, so we can all see the chat in front of us. I'm going to put here. So what do we have here? What do we have? Okay. So we have for topics here, because I know you got to go by 7. I have Trump, FBI, comma, COVID, comma, free speech. One of the big questions me and Mark want to ask you is the free speech in Canada as compared to the U.S., if you know, or just free speech in Canada.
Oh, no, I've lived through the comparison now. It's
perfect. Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and throw those 4 topics right in the middle of the chat right there. And what we'll do, guys, is give me so I can get a start time going. I'm going to start at 7:15 for me. So I'm going to go silent here in about the next 10 seconds. Just so we got a little intro, and I will come back on, introduce us, say the time, and then David, you want me to say David Frei height?
Phonetically, it's like the 2 words fry and height. Fry
okay,
height.
So I'm going to get that. So fry and height?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So David Frei height. All right, I will pronounce. So David Frei height. Got it. All right, going to change my time to 7:35, and here we go. 3, 2, 1, and we're going to go silent.
All right.
All right, so good evening. Welcome to everyone in the live cast and everyone who's with us tonight and going to listen to this on the podcast. Tonight we have David Frei with us. You know him probably better as Viva Frei or Viva Frei, I should probably say. But I will figure that out in a second once David introduces himself. 2 Feds and the Truth, me, Mark, and Julia, we're all big fans, super excited to have David in the free state of Florida. He lives like 10 miles from me. So we're definitely going to meet up. It's going to be fun. And he went to the courthouse this week when Trump was having the hearing with the government, with the United States totalitarian government that we have, of the search warrant, right? So we're going to talk about President Trump. We're going to talk about the search warrant. We're going to talk about Mar-a-Lago. And we're going to talk about, since Viva is from Canada and now he's in Florida, we are curious from such an esteemed lawyer and now my colleague and hopefully friends to tell us, some of the differences between the First Amendment that we have here in America, which, I think we all know from the get-go, just, has a lot more area for us to speak than there is in Canada. But definitely want to hear it from David, and what it was like, being up there with Trudeau. And I'm glad that David's down here in Florida, and I know that he likes it. We've chatted on the phone a few times. So with that being said, David, Viva, you're the man. You're the guest tonight. We're so honored to have you. For people that don't know you, if they're not in the legal world or if they're living under a rock, feel free to go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone in the live cast tonight, sir. Go ahead.
All right. First of all, Andrew, thank you for having me. It's super cool. I'm not used to live audio only, although I've done a bunch of radio, so it's all coming back to me now. I don't have to worry. My hair is wet, so my afro is not there, and nobody's going to see it to make fun of me. So the 30,000 foot overview for who I am: David Frei, Viva Frei, Montreal born and raised, youngest of 5 kids. 4 of the 5 kids turned out to be lawyers. My father's a lawyer. I practiced actively sworn in 2007, did my internship in 2006. So I had a good 13 years of active practice. So I'm not just someone with a degree who got into this YouTube world without actually having meaningful litigation experience. I did commercial litigation only in Quebec, was certified for the province of Quebec and federal laws throughout Canada, but not common law in other provinces because we have 2 different systems in Canada. And at one point in time, I decided I'm leaving law. I can't stand it. If I see the inside of a courtroom again as a lawyer, I just couldn't stand it. And I said, if I'm doing this in 10 years, I'm going to be a very unhappy 50-year-old. So I jumped off this cliff known as getting into YouTube, grew my wings as I fell down, and luckily it panned out despite all odds.
Yeah, that's awesome. You have hit the ground running. I was talking to Mark today. Just millions of views over on YouTube, and I was watching you this week when you were over at the courthouse, which was only a few miles from where I work, and lots of stuff going on. And let's just jump right into it. As you've been down here, well, let's go with this. What have you seen when you lived in Canada, and now that you've come down to Florida, you've been here? What's the biggest difference you've seen about, especially during the times with the Hong Kong going up in COVID and Justin Trudeau and all of that happening up there? Really culturally and legally, what's the biggest difference that hit you when you moved down to Florida? And then you said, wow, there's obviously some sort of difference from Canada, I would think. What were your first impressions?
Okay, so, in Canada, we have some stereotypes of Americans. And I say we as in Canada as a collective, not me as an individual.
Yeah. Right.
Gun-toting, Texan, Wild West is the way Americans are generally depicted stereotypically in Canada.
Right.
I have family that's American. I'm more aware of the reality in America above and beyond the stereotype. That being said, Florida has a stereotype of its own everywhere in the world, but in Canada especially. You hear about people wrestling alligators. You hear a crazy story. You say it's got to be Florida,
Yes.
And Florida is unique. It's unique in the people's love for freedom, the people's love for as little government invasion as possible. And what made Florida sort of call it the object of jokes and stereotypes and funny things in movies is what makes it one of the last bastions for freedom against what has become basically a global phenomenon of absolute government overreach into all aspects of human civilian life. Canada, the distinction is this: it's rights versus privileges. And Canada and Canadians, for the most part, tend to view what are viewed as constitutional, God-given rights in the United States as government-attributed privileges in Canada. Your freedom of speech, you have freedom of speech under the Charter, but, not if it's hate speech, not if it's what people call hate speech, not if it makes people uncomfortable. And so we're much, much quicker as a culture in Canada to accept infringements on what are or ought to be considered rights, because we tend to view them as privileges that are granted by the government, subject to the greater good, despite not knowing what the greater good is, or despite not knowing that the greater good is individual rights. And coming down here, it's a different world. Culturally, COVID-wise, If Canadians came down here, some would have an anxiety attack because they would see people without masks, not social distancing, living life as normal, compared to the terror that they have been traumatized into living through for the last 2 years in Canada.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's we are absolutely happy to get that, and we've always noticed a difference. And I know that Mark was recently in Canada, so he had some fun up there. He was up there for a weekend or so. Real quick on the take, because I know we want to go to Trump and the FBI search warrant. What was your take on the truckers up in Canada and Trudeau using his emergency powers to essentially bring out the tactical units and crush that?
Trudeau is a fascist tyrant. I'm not mincing my words with this anymore. People, I get into fights with people on the internet, or disagreements where they say he's not a dictator. He was democratically elected. I was like, first of all, the mark of a dictator is not signing a resolution in Parliament decreeing that he's a dictator. He is a fascist dictator in the purest of the senses, in that he's bought off the media to do his bidding for him. He behaves in a demagogic manner. He suppresses basic freedoms. He resorts to threats, violence, and intimidation. He is a fascist tyrant. The suppression of that protest brought to the realization of a bunch of people that the Canadian media lies through its teeth. It is subsidized by the government that gets it to lie for the government's benefit. The misinformation on that protest, I know there's a lot of misinformation and media hype about January 6th. Put steroids in that is the degree of misinformation about the Ottawa protest. It was nothing even close to a January 6th, and that, bear in mind that January 6th wasn't anything close to what the media says it was or what that congressional hearing makes it out to be. And he came in with a militarized police force, literally busted skulls, literally detonated concussive grenades, pepper sprayed, beat people up, jailed people indefinitely. I've got nothing nice to say about Justin Trudeau other than he is the best prime minister to sink Canada in record time than any prime minister in Canada has ever been able to do.
Yeah, I remember watching some of the stuff down here, and we were talking about it with Mark and Julia, and we were watching it where the horses came out and, they ran over the elderly lady, and yep. It was just, and we had a lot of Canadians in our Twitter spaces, and we were talking about this could be your time to stand up. At some point Trudeau's going to do that, but you know what, it is what it is. We're glad you're down here. Let's move on, because I know that we have limited time. Let's go right to Trump and the FBI search warrant. So as you've been covering it up there as well. Biden's in power. 2020 election is what it is at this point. We've had two states, I believe Arizona and Wisconsin, if I'm correct. Julia can correct me if I'm wrong, that have decertified their electoral votes. So, that's in the process. I'm not saying Trump's coming back anytime soon. First time would be 2024, right? But, we currently have a president and an attorney general in Merrick Garland who has fully weaponized the Department of Justice, where I used to work, has fully weaponized the FBI. And at this point, you have them essentially, getting a search warrant from Magistrate Judge Bruce Reinhardt, who I used to work with, who was a prosecutor with me at the time of Jeffrey Epstein, and then wound up defending the Epstein criminal enterprise a little bit after that. Now he's a federal magistrate, and he's now hearing this case. He was the one that signed off on the search warrant. So, lots of interesting backbones, a lot of interesting backstories and back channels on this. And, what is your take on essentially Merrick Garland, the attorney general, going after another political opponent who seems to be, as we talk now, the front runner for 2024?
Andrew, my take is in line with a recent Rasmussen poll that just came out today that said something like 67% of Republicans, 50% of independents, and 30% of Democrats think that Joe Biden is using the FBI and the Justice Department like his personal Gestapo. It's so obscene, and it's so over the top, and it's so outrageous the degree to which this corruption has been normalized. This is the same FBI which falsified, through their counsel, falsified evidence. I know your viewers are all going to know this. Falsified evidence to submit it to a secret FISA court to spy on the Trump campaign through Carter Page. It's the same FBI. 5 years later now, they're going for, I don't know what number kick at the can they are. The same FBI that has been corrupt since its history, but in your face corrupt within the Trump presidency, specifically for going after him. Now doing it again. You got this magistrate Reinhardt, who a month and a half ago recused himself from from this file involving Trump and the Clintons for obvious reasons, doesn't recuse himself from this, signs off on yet again another secret warrant effectively, goes to raid the former president's house. I mean, it's over the top obscene, but it's so egregious. It's almost like a form of propaganda where they say, make up a lie so outrageous that people would think no person in their right mind would make up such a lie so outrageous. And they're doing it. It's basically conduct yourselves in a manner that is so outrageous that people would have to say, nobody would be this outrageous unless they had a good reason, and sort of fabricate the reason for it. It's preposterous. I went to the hearing to hear, the Justice Department is playing transparency like it's a game of 3-card Monty. They'll show you the stuff that they want to show you about the warrant, about the list of the exhibits seized, but they won't show you the other stuff that might show you that you were screwed from the beginning and they were out to get you from the beginning. They're opposing releasing the affidavit. Obvious arguments, it'll compromise the ongoing investigation. Same rubbish they did with the Russia hoax for 3 years. And we'll see. But it's just corruption through and through on its face. A judge who defended and got a very suspiciously good plea deal for some of the alleged co-conspirators in Epstein, recuses himself from a file involving Trump, a civil matter, Trump and the Clintons, a month and a half ago, signs off on this warrant, unheard of, unprecedented, at the request of the same FBI that less than 5 years ago literally falsified evidence to a secret FISA court. And some people say, better believe Garland when he says the FBI is trustworthy, patriotic, and just doing their jobs.
So we've seen Trump have, the Russia gate. We've seen him impeached twice, all these processes, right? This to me seems completely different. This seems like it's actually, Department of Justice. You understand this. You can't get a search warrant. You can't apply and get one signed by a judge or magistrate without probable cause that a crime has occurred. So what's the difference here? Is this going to move the needle at all? Does this make Trump done? Does this harm him? Especially considering maybe an impending indictment. Or is this just par of the course for him and it's just going to make him stronger?
Well, from what I understand constitutionally, even if they indict him, which they seem hell-bent on doing, constitutionally, it won't preclude him from running for president again. As far as I understand it, it's a constitutional requirement that can't be changed. But that's I'm not going to say it's a talking point. That's the argument. A magistrate wouldn't sign off on the warrant unless they felt that there was probable cause. And Reinhardt said that in the hearing yesterday. He says, this is not suspected probable cause. I saw it. I issued the warrant. There's probable cause. But that's the version 2.0 of Kleinsmith falsifying evidence to go to a secret FISA court to get the renewal of a spy warrant. Surely they wouldn't have renewed it if they didn't have sufficient evidence. Oh, they had sufficient evidence. It's just that in that case, it happened to be absolutely falsified by the FBI's own lawyer, who, by the way, wasn't disbarred for life, didn't go to jail for years like Roger Stone, retroactive 1-year suspension back at the practice. So I'm sure, in the ordinary run of things, you don't get a warrant without probable cause. In the ordinary run of things, you don't get a warrant to ransack the residence of the former president of the United States without extreme probable cause. So I'll be curious to see what's in that affidavit, what they release and what they don't release. But my sneaking suspicion, there's a big fat stinking nothing burger in that affidavit. I think the judge probably knows it. And so what they're going to have to redact versus make public is going to have to show enough to ostensibly justify it, but not all of it to show that it couldn't be justified. So keep some redactions to maintain the mystery. But the truth will come out. The sunlight will disinfect this festering wound. I don't think Trump comes out weaker. If they go absolutely ballistic and proceed with an indictment, they're just going to discredit themselves in ways that is currently being reflected within the general population, such that, to the point that 37% of Democrats allegedly feel, if you believe the Rasmussen poll, that Biden's using the Justice Department like his personal Gestapo.
like I said, we've seen all these different Trump dramas, I'll call them, right? Whether they're dramas or not, the media, the government, anti-Trumpers have all said it, right? Is this one going to be any different? Is this going to move the needle? Because it seems to me, after 4 years of a Trump presidency, almost a year and a half, post-Trump presidency, the people have either made up their mind. They're either pro-Trump, anti-Trump. Is this any different? Is this going to do anything?
It's funny, actually. I think it's moving the needle in the other way. And I'm not trying to dunk or dump on Sam Harris for what he just said recently, like Trump is such a threat. You have to hide the truth about the Biden crime family to get him in office. But, when Sam Harris said that, you got the Jimmy Dores out there, people on the left saying, no, this is not justifiable just because you like the way it's being used right now. A lot of people in the middle are realizing this has gone too far. You're going to have your diehard TDS individuals who they'll either choose to believe the lies or they're going to choose to accept the corruption because it's directed against an existential threat to them. But there's a lot of people who are actually either mildly reasonable or being severely red-pilled in real time, to the point that, a month ago, could you imagine mainstream American society saying defund the FBI or disband the FBI? I suspect not. And now it's becoming something that is being much more favorably viewed as far as an actual reasonable prospect for the future. It's going to galvanize the base of the GOP for the midterms, and if they keep pushing this envelope, it's going to permanently discredit the institution for anybody with a remotely open mind, but not for the 15 to 20% rabid base that just want to see this happen, hell or high water.
Definitely agree with that, Viva. I want to jump back to a point that Crypto was making with regards to something that that many weren't able to do the other day, and that was the fact that you made it into the West Palm Beach Federal Courthouse. You were able to see Judge Bruce Reinhart in action. I did listen to your YouTube video on this. You said there were a line of journalists. You waited for 2 hours. You took your chances, but you still managed to get in. So I was wondering if you could give a quick rundown of how you managed to do that when so many people appeared to be left outside. Well, did you glean any interesting information from being inside beyond what was reported in the news about this?
Well, I had there was a lot of interesting people watching because I was there. I'm not part of this journalist media circuit, so nobody knew who I was. It was weird. It's a total fluke. I'm about an hour away. I say I'll just drive down and see what happens. I knew it was at 1:00, so I left at 10:30. I got there by 11, and I asked the officer outside, what are the chances of me getting in? And he says, slim to none. People have been, here since first thing in the morning. You don't have credentials, so put your phone, put your computer away, and don't bring it in. And I just said, what was the last word that you heard?
You know what? It doesn't matter because I had to close the other one, so I'll merge them and I'll edit it.
Okay.
But so don't worry about that. But Julia, your question was, okay. So David, no problem. Yeah. You were talking about that you got there and there was little to no chance of getting in.
And then I heard you say that you didn't view yourself as one of the journalists. As part of that.
So you missed the entire part about a woman named Karen Turk that I met in line.
Yes.
Yeah. I didn't hear that.
Oh my God, you met Karen?
Yeah, so I know nobody. I'm not a journalist. I don't know these journalists. It wasn't like I was going back to Ottawa live streaming there where by day 2, everyone knew me and I sort of knew everybody. I get in there, I see the journalists mingling among themselves. I'm eavesdropping on their conversations. There was nothing juicy. It was just weird listening to, these journalists who operate within their own ideological silo talk to each other. But I heard one guy talk about the fact that he's up to 4 vaccines and all this stuff. It's nuts. But then I'm standing next to a woman who it looked like people knew who she was and people were coming up to her. Anyway, it turns out her name is Karen Turk, who's there to watch Judge Reinhart because Karen Turk, this is all public and I'm not sharing any secrets. I had to look it up afterwards as well. Judge Reinhart sentenced Karen Turk, for those who don't know, to 30 days in a federal detention center for a misdemeanor to which she pleaded guilty. Correct. I subsequently learned she's very political, supports Donald Trump, good friends with Roger Stone. The night before her sentencing, attended some political fundraiser. And Judge Reinhart, where she pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor, she wasn't supposed to serve any jail time. Judge Reinhart unilaterally sentences her to 30 days and says he wants to make an example out of her. So that anecdote I thought was interesting to illustrate Reinhart's clear, if not underlying, political bias. But the thing that I found most amazing is that he doesn't just have a political bias in this. He's got an ego self-preservation bias in this because, like he said during the hearing, he issued the warrant because he thought there was probable cause. If the evidence comes out and says if Reinhardt thought there was probable cause based on the dearth or an absence of evidence, well, his judgment is very questionable, and then people are going to look into why. So he's not just politically motivated potentially in this based on what appears to be his history. He's got self-preservation motivation in all of this to make sure that this story gets crafted and drafted in a way that doesn't make him look like he's got very poor politically motivated judgment.
Really excellent points, and that's why I found it so interesting to watch your YouTube feed on that, because you did say, I see everything that this judge does as tainted by political bias. It's not corruption, it's abuse of power. It is weaponizing the judicial and prosecutorial system. And then you also added, and I thought this is a fantastic point, it's unprecedented. So that means there needs to be an unprecedented level of transparency. And I definitely couldn't agree more. So a question that everyone's asking, and I've got to ask this, is should the FBI be defunded, peacefully dismantled, or both? And if not, how do we solve this problem then? A corrupt government agency that's been weaponized to attack political opposition.
It's what it was designed to do. It's what J. Edgar Hoover designed it to do. It's what he used it as for nearly 50 years. The issue is it's an administrative construct. The police powers of the state is a constitutional construct. This was an administrative body. It's got no legislative reason to exist. It's grown like the proverbial blob, and it has always been politically motivated, and not necessarily Democrat versus Republican. I'll even say just deep state objectives. The war machine objectives, the military industrial complex objectives. Justifying their own existence objectives. When there's no enemies to fight, at some point you have to create the enemies, like that movie Unbreakable. And so you get your PatCon controversies. You get arguably your Whitmer entrapment controversies. You get the FBI creating the problems so they can justify their own existence to resolve those problems, but there's no constitutional reason for its existence. I don't know. The last person who talked about disbanding the FBI, it didn't work well for him. But to me, it seems obvious. I don't know what the FBI has where their big notches in the belt or feathers in the cap have come recently. I can just think of 6 examples of things that they seem to have been very involved in that went down badly, and I can think of 3 or 4 concrete examples where their corruption tainted the entire process.
Yeah, excellent points. And then you also made a point about, I just thought it was really funny. I wanted to add this, that the vast majority of law enforcement in Florida seems to be ex-New York cops. So I just had to quickly ask Crypto if that was the case, or where you came about with that.
Crypto, is my observation correct? I mean, I'm good with accent.
No, yeah, you are, and we have a lot of ex guys that did their 20 years up north and then came down here. I know a lot of the school BSO, the Broward Sheriff's Office and the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. I know a lot of them are on their second 20. So yeah, when you look at the PBSO and especially the Boca Raton Police Department, Delray Police Department, Boynton Beach, a lot of them are from here, but you will definitely see those guys there. Viva's right. There's a lot of them that did their 20 up there, and then they came down to retire, and they hopped on the squad again. And what better place to do it than Florida, right?
And also, I just want to point out or highlight that I appreciate my own bias. Like I am operating off the underlying sentiment that Reinhardt is. I won't say corrupt. That he's motivated in this case, like that. So, and therefore, perhaps everything I see in this is going to be a reflection of my own underlying bias. But I think I've got the evidentiary support to justify the belief that something smells very, very, very fishy in this case. And past is prologue. They tried the FBI intelligence. They funded or entertained that bogus Christopher Steele dossier. They leaked it to the media so the media could then leak it and publish it, so they can then use the publications to go to a court and say, look, the media reported on this, it's got to be true, so let's move on it. They fabricated evidence via Kleinsmith and Carter Page. They have now at least entrapped 2 of 4, if not 4 defendants in Whitmer. At some point, their methods become so problematic that becomes the problem. And I'm viewing everything that's going down now with that in mind, and I think justifiably so.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to Whitmer in a second. I know that Julia knows that very well. Getting to Reinhardt, though, it's very interesting. So the 10 years that I was with DOJ, what would happen is we would do a search warrant. We may have an arrest warrant with her, maybe just a search warrant. And then it becomes sealed. No one talks about it. I think, this is my own opinion, and I haven't read it anywhere, so maybe it's already out there. I think when Garland went on TV and started responding to Trump, he essentially opened up the door he couldn't shut. Because what you normally do at DOJ is you just say, listen, there's an ongoing active investigation. We're not talking about it. The search warrant is sealed, right? The probable cause affidavit, that's sealed. But all of a sudden, Garland took the position of, well, I signed off on it personally. And then these executives, they started talking about it. So DOJ opened the door. Then you have the Reinhardt issue come up. And then it's almost like DOJ opened this door that then got kicked open, that they're trying to now close. They only want to give some of it, when in reality, you don't give any of it. You give the search warrant to the person that you did the search on. You give them the inventory in return, and that's it. No one else gets to see anything. Everything else remains under seal. But Garland opened up his fucking mouth, and now he's trying to close the door he opened. That's at least my thought on this.
But the one step before that, I think, and this the critical one, is Trump talked about it. Like, Trump went public with it.
Right.
Where they might have thought Trump's not going to go public with it because it's too embarrassing. It'll be politically compromising, and they'll just do this in the dead of the night, and Trump will shut his face. I mean, I don't know who in their right mind did not know. It's not a question of predicting. Trump is going to fight this through the public, not on Twitter anymore, but he's going to fight this in the court of public opinion. So if anybody thought they would just like sweep this under the rug because Trump wouldn't make a big stink about it, that just goes to show you how idiotic they are and how in their own silo they live. But then once Trump makes it public, then people are like, this is not like I don't want to say a third world because it's a derogatory way of like, this is not like East Europe. This is not, we don't have Stasi and secret police raiding former political candidates and top rivals. This is not the type. We're not a banana republic here. And then Merrick's got to say, oh, don't worry, we're not a banana republic. I signed off on it personally. Merrick Garland, the guy who might have something of a grudge against Trump and Republicans in general, I signed off on it. And I found a magistrate to rubber stamp this. Oh, the magistrate happens to have a history defending Epstein and Epstein al. And now it's like, yeah, once the door was opened, I think it was Trump that opened it, they didn't think he would do it. Now they're caught, with their hands in their pants because now everybody's seeing the dirty, dirty business that they're up to, and they've got to try to keep coming up with justifications for doing it. And now it's, they leaked the risk of nuclear documents after Garland said he's not going to talk about it. So they've got to live off the fear, live off the rumors, because I think the reality is going to show that this was nothing more than an absolute outright political hit job. All they want is an indictment so they can say twice impeached and now indicted, disqualified from office.
Exactly. And when Trump opened that door, they should have simply said, listen, we don't talk about ongoing active investigations, but instead they made their comments and then the door got kicked open and then now they want to close it. So question to you, Viva, and then I'm gonna go back to Julia. Let's say Trump gets indicted. It seems everyone's kind of going there that, whatever line we thought was going to be crossed has been crossed, and they're going to cross it and they're going to indict him. Trump could very well be down here. He comes down in a couple months, or I guess a few months, who knows, for his winter home here. So he'll be within a couple miles of me and, 10, 15 miles of you. What if any, what's going to be the reaction when President Trump has to get booked into the Palm Beach County jail when that grand jury comes back with that true bill of indictment? What's the reaction there?
It had better have something. I mean, it's a joke. I just try to hypothesize, try to steel man what could possibly be in that indictment. Well, we know it's not nuclear codes. We know it's probably not nuclear documents. What it's going to be is a NARA violation. He didn't give back documents that the, what do they call them? The NARA is the National Archives something Act. What does the R stand for? The National Archives and the indictable offense to arrest or indict a former president is that he allegedly did not return government records, which people are going to be asking questions. How many documents does Obama have? How many documents does Bill Clinton have? Isn't there a process for discussing the return of allegedly, personal records versus presidential records? And even if that's the case, that's what you execute a warrant with 19 armed FBI agents on a former president's house. If they indict, it's going to be the last nail in their political coffin. People who might have been on the fence about this, and I don't know how there can be anybody left on the fence. They go with Russiagate hoax for 3 years. That turns out not just to be nothing, turns out to be a hoax. Then they go with an impeachment, the first one, on a basis that was thinner than a piece of paper to begin with. It doesn't go anywhere. Then they go with, I forget what happened next. Then the second impeachment, after he's out of office, they look like frothing, rabid political lunatics who have lost any and all credibility. And anybody with a fraction of a functioning brain will see it. And if they indict, it will be sealing the deal for anybody who has a remotely open mind left.
Yeah, I definitely want to hit on free speech a little bit before we jump into the Whitmer kidnapping plot, or Fednapping plot, as Julie Kelly has dubbed it. I was amazed to see how many people seem to think the Alex Jones defamation trial was, solely about Sandy Hook and Alex Jones, rather than an early volley, an attempt to silence those that have views contrary to those in power. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on the broader issue, or on the broader issue of opinion speech in general.
It's an interesting thing. People say free speech, you're either absolutely for it or absolutely against it, and it should be limitless. But they don't really appreciate that you do have defamation limits to free speech. You have criminal harassment, true threats, etc. What shocks me the most about the Alex Jones trial and the public sentiment of those who think it's justified or justifiable is the sheer ignorance of what people understand he actually said versus what he actually said. And it's not to justify anything of the impugned statements Jones said. I said at the time, these are stupid things to say. It might be worth something in defamation, but not $50 million in defamation. It wasn't like he was out. People have the wrong impression that he was out day in and day out promoting the theory that they were crisis actors, that there were absolutely no dead children. And they don't understand what he actually did, which was maybe say two stupid things over a course of many years, entertaining certain theories for the purposes of discussion, but consistently and repeatedly acknowledge the tragedy and ultimately apologize for the stupid things that he said at the time. What people don't understand is the broader impact of this. Nobody cared when Alex Jones was deplatformed from all of social media because they found a way to justify it to themselves in their own minds. He's dangerous. He's mean. He says stupid things. It's fine then to deplatform him. And then it just became an epidemic. Deplatforming anybody who posts anti-COVID tweets. Naomi Wolf, Children's Defense has just been deplatformed from Instagram and Facebook. Children's Health Defense. They didn't appreciate it that Alex Jones was the canary in the coal mine for unpersoning people with controversial views when they've achieved a certain size. They don't appreciate what this trial is, which was find a way to default someone so they can't defend themselves, so that the only issue to deal with is the quantum, not culpability, so that you can control misinformation. And that's what the prosecution, the plaintiff's lawyers said verbatim. I can't remember verbatim. They said, this is about controlling misinformation. The plaintiff, Ms. Lewis, she said, I want to establish an era of truth. This was 10% about what he actually said and 90% about what he stood for, which is free speech, questioning official narrative. And what the government wants to do through this is set up a precedent where people get sentenced to massive amounts of punitive, whatever damages, because what they said might have been offensive, but might have challenged the official narrative.
Seems to be working already. Now, do you think a preponderance of the evidence, so i.e. 50.1% sure, do you think that's too low of a bar to confiscate $45 million from a person?
Well, they're going to reduce that because the 45 million punitive, I think it's capped at 750,000 or something. But well, the preponderance is for the conviction. It's a civil case, so it's not a conviction, but for the verdict. But look, I could even be led to believe that he caused them damages through the false statements. He ought to have verified a little more. I can even appreciate that. But you quantify it in a manner that's proportionate to the injury. Anybody people have equivocated what Alex Jones did to what the murderer did, and equivocated any damages that they might have suffered from Alex Jones's flippant statements to the damages and emotional distress that they actually suffered at the hands of the killer. And worse yet, nobody talks about it. The damages that they might have suffered due to the inaction or negligence by the school that didn't implement basic safety protocol to, if not outright prevent, at the very least mitigate the consequences of this type of thing. But no, maybe it's by design. Maybe it's because people didn't ask the right questions. But they go after Alex Jones as though he is the sole person responsible for all of this tragedy, not the individual himself, not the school for not having proper safety protocol, nothing else. And it's convenient, and some do think it's just by design. Look over there, so we never have to address the fundamental safety deficiencies from that school who failed to implement what they ought to have implemented, what they were seemingly getting funding to implement, and just control the dialogue that way.
Right. I mean, the murderer didn't end up having to pay 45 million or, whatever it ends up being. It still could be in the, tens of millions.
No, they sued Remington. They sued Remington. One plaintiff tried to sue the school. Nobody sued the school. They tore down the school so that, frustrating any ability to potentially look at deficiencies which might have led to change in other schools. No, none of that. It's go after the gun manufacturers, bankrupt them in Connecticut. Go after Alex Jones, a man who, I'll even grant that he said very stupid, very insensitive things, whether or not under American law that could possibly lead to defamation, emotional distress. I think it probably could, not in the order of 45 million. But no, don't look at meaningful issues that can actually prevent this or mitigate this in the future. Go after the gun manufacturers and go after big bad Alex Jones because they're easy targets.
Right, and they're going after them for a gun that worked as advertised.
It's like wait until they start doing people who drive their cars into crowds of people. There is absolutely no difference from a legal standpoint. Go sue the guy in Waukesha who drove his vehicle into a crowd of people, killing them. He made criminal use of a lawful product.
Well, we can definitely get to I think it's Daryl Brooks. We'll get to him in a second. So I'm curious on that. That's a great point that you brought up, Viva. Just for Julia and for Viva, my understanding for Connecticut, I don't practice there, but they have a 2x cap on punitive. So my understanding is that the compensatory was $4 million. The punitives will be capped around 8, and he'll have to pay 12. So
but no, you might be getting. I'm not sure what's going on in Connecticut. This one was in Texas, where they got $4 million. On 4.5 million on the damages, the IIED, right. And then they 45 million on punitive. But I think in Texas it's capped at, I don't know what it is, but I think it came to 750,000.
Right. So in Texas though, it's 750,000 or 2x, whatever's larger. Okay. So it's going to come out the same way. So it's going to come out. So yeah. So I mean, I think it's a little ridiculous still on that $12 million end, but you have people on CNN and you have all these pundits saying that it's absolutely ridiculous. He's being let off the hook. But you know what? You brought up a great point. It hopped in my mind, and then I'm going to go to Julia and Mark on this. You brought up Daryl Brooks. Daryl Brooks, no one knows him. No one's going to know him. We know him because of this factor. If you have these crimes, these shooters, and whether they're shooters, drivers, whatever they may do, not Florida per se, but the United States, if you've noticed, Viva, we have a serious race problem, and we are hung up on race. I don't know why. I've been to other countries, but we are all about race here. And it seems, though, that with bail reforms happening in New York, happening in California, other places as well, where you can essentially rob, do a home invasion, possibly kill someone and be out on bail the next day. Daryl Brooks is a great example. People in here probably don't remember him, but he was the guy coming off of the Kyle Rittenhouse shooting. He's the guy who was fleeing a domestic and was a black male in an automobile, an SUV, and ran over a bunch of white people and killed some people. And you know what? The media didn't cover it. The media didn't care about it. it was like it never happened because that driver was black. And
Andrew,
we have a serious. Go ahead.
I know. I was going to say. I think my memory might be wrong, but I don't think he was fleeing a domestic. I think that was one of the excuses that the media gave at the beginning to almost try to attenuate the incident to make it look like an accident and not an act of deliberate targeted murder. He had a number of very politically motivated posts on Facebook that they discovered afterwards. But in the early stages, in order to downplay it, I think they were suggesting he was fleeing a domestic, he lost control of the vehicle, whatever. Where that clearly wasn't the case. It's pathological in the media. Like it's not just Darrell Brooks. I mean, I forgot that was his name. The Pulse nightclub shooter, where they try to make it something that it's not, as though to mitigate the horror of it. The San Bernardino shooting, where they said it was an act of workplace violence and not terrorism. It's pathological dishonesty when it comes to the media. But setting that aside, the race issues in the States are, it's trickling up to Canada. Justin Trudeau's trying to, divide Canada ethnically, racially, by gender, as much as we've seen politicians do it here in the States. But for me, the amazing thing is, they want to go after companies for the unlawful use of proper functioning products. I appreciate people think guns serve no other purpose than to kill humans. It's not. I appreciate that. I disagree with it. They have other purposes, they have other functions, self-defense, hunting. And so someone making unlawful use of a proper functioning lawful object, and people are cheering, going off and bankrupting the company, will then do that to cars, do that to knives, do that to rat poison, do that to the lady who killed her husband with hydroxychloroquine fish tank stuff, even though she never got charged. I mean, there's no end to it. If they're going to go after the manufacturers for the proper functioning but criminal use of lawful products, I don't know what they could be so short-sighted to think, well, it'll just stay limited to guns. And maybe it will, which would also show the political motivation of the debate.
Yeah, so, you mentioned the Pulse nightclub shooter, and I remember that, and I studied that case very, very closely. If you recall the 911 tape, okay, that the shooter made, he called up and he said, this is a jihad attack. I'm here to kill all these gays, and, and make no mistake about it, this is a jihad. And the government did everything in their power to not get that released, and I think ultimately it still didn't. So where does free speech lie in there? As far as the free press, the media getting this stuff, and like you talk about Waukesha, Darrell Brooks, the media made that out to be a vehicle ran people over. A vehicle did this.
By the way, I just had to refresh my memory, but also the Orlando nightclub shooter, the Pulse shooter, his father was an FBI informant. It's amazing how these things happen.
Yeah, I just get stuck on that is where is the media, when they're doing the narrative push versus the fact push, and it's just tough because it ultimately also comes down to race. And if it's a minority shooter or an Islamic attacker, then it's all buried. It's all about the object. Versus if it is a white nationalist shooter or something like that, then it's all about white. So.
And it's not to downplay one or the other. It's just treat them equally. Right. The media doesn't do it. The question is why.
Yeah, very, very good questions. We'll head back to Julia if she's ready.
Certainly. So I wanted to jump over to the Whitmer Fednapping plot. So it came out during this Fednapping trial that's currently occurring that an FBI supervisory agent, Henrique Impola, said to one of the FBI informants, "We have a saying in my office, don't let the facts get in the way of a good story." So to me, this brings up entrapment and malicious prosecution questions. Just wondering what your thoughts are on that, Viva.
I got flack from friends and others for entertaining the idea that it might have been entrapment early on. I do these weekly streams with Robert Barnes, and he has a much better understanding of history, which makes him much more insightful at predicting the future. And we were talking about it from early on. It's like, oh, it's an election. It's November election. out of the blue, this militia that nobody's ever heard of recruits these guys who people were calling them names at the beginning in terms of like undermining their capabilities. But a dude with no money living in the basement of a vacuum shop, talking about getting a helicopter and kidnapping the governor of Michigan. I mean, it sounded fishy from the beginning. And then as more details came out, it became fishier and fishier. And then at some point it became so fishy that even BuzzFeed, had to write an article ostensibly normalizing entrapment, where they're like saying, yeah, there's more informants and FBI agents involved in foiling this plot than alleged defendants. And the informants have an active role in procuring stuff, organizing stuff, training individuals. And then at some point they're like, okay, yeah, at what point does this become entrapment of vulnerable, call them unsavory characters, but vulnerable people who are always high, apparently, from the most recent trial. The defendant always high, got high, the agent smoked weed with him. The fantastical imaginings of a high individual who's being egged on by FBI informants who are offering to give him credit cards to buy arms, to buy weapons because he couldn't do it on his own. At some point, people have to ask themselves, are they foiling it or are they setting it up? In this case, I think easily crossed the line. And we'll just see if we'll see what a verdict shows. But it also just shows a bit of the MO of the FBI. And it's like, it causes everything to be tainted and it causes people to question everything. And the issue is, how do you just reestablish credibility and faith in these institutions in as much as it might not be possible?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because at least one of the primary targets was one of the informants was Adam Fox, who was at the time living in a dilapidated cellar of a vacuum repair shop without running water or a toilet. And that was, of course, at the Grand Rapids Strip Mall. So just wanted to point out that in April, the prosecutors failed to win a single conviction. And of course, this was in one of the government's biggest domestic terror investigations in decades. And they actually ended up acquitting 2 men on every count after defense attorneys successfully argued their clients were entrapped by the FBI. They didn't reach a verdict on the 2 other men. That's Adam Fox and Barry Croft, who are facing a second trial. So I'm glad you brought up the smoking pot point, because, FBI informants were indeed smoking pot while they recorded impaired conversations that they would eventually use against one of the defendants. They were also taking defendants to eat, taking them on excursions, and perhaps most shocking of all, one informant actually even shared the same hotel room, and this was with defendant Barry Croft, during a weekend excursion in Wisconsin, and that was according to testimony by an FBI agent last week. The agent actually admitted they never heard before of such an arrangement between the informant and an advocate. So I'm just wondering, what do you think of all of that? Does this not sound like a movie to you?
It sounds like a bad movie. I mean, but now I go back and look at movies like Donnie Brasco, and I say, like, at what point do they cross the line? Smoking weed with them, and then recording the conversations. Look, I haven't done it in a long time, but I think I remember what weed does to you, and it makes you have ridiculous thoughts. The potential honeypotting. You're talking about loners who don't have money, who might not have friends, and now they have I don't know what the FBI agent looks like. I presume might shoot. A woman paying attention to this guy can get people to also do stupid things. One of the informants was offering paid credit cards to the defendants so they could then go out and buy stuff that they couldn't otherwise buy. And I mean, yeah, you have to ask, what the hell is going on? These people, the alleged defendants, other than sitting around drinking beer, smoking weed, talking about getting a helicopter and getting Whitmer, that would have never, by anyone's account, done this, but for the active instigation of FBI informants who are making a decent living doing this. One of the FBI informants there had been getting paid tens of thousands of dollars in cash, computer reimbursed, all this stuff. One of the informants said he made more in a few months being an informant than in an entire year of his ordinary job. This looks like a criminal enterprise, and someone's going to have to work very hard to convince me that it's not.
And then you've got I'm thinking to J6 just because of the slight connection here that and I saw this from your Twitter feed actually, that documentarian Ford Fisher was digging through J6 footage and he discovered something he didn't know he had captured. He said on the Capitol East Side, Capitol Police Lieutenant Tariq Khalid Johnson is in my footage wearing a MAGA hat and shouting into a bullhorn. So I mean,
and not just that. One of the field officers from the FBI from the Whitmer case is working in the January 6th investigation. It's a big incestuous club, and we ain't in it. To modify the George Carlin quote.
At some point, people have to stop saying, these are just conspiracy theories when there's all this evidence out there.
My modern take on conspiracy theories is it's like magic for kids. Magic for kids blows their mind, but as an adult, it's not magic anymore because you know exactly how it happens. These are conspiracy theories to people who don't understand how things actually work, who don't have the actual information as to what has happened in recent memory. It's not just not talking about Operation Northwoods, Operation Paperclip, Operation Mockingbird, MK. We're not talking about stuff that's decades old. In recent memory, people who reflexively refer to these things as conspiracy theories, they just don't understand the basic mechanics. They don't understand the basic facts, and it's all magical fantasy to them. And it's the most frustrating thing is trying to make them understand that it's not just conspiracy theory. It's proven fact. It's happened time and time again, and it will happen again in the future in the absence of a very watchful eye of a very vigilant populace.
Well said. And it's just so hard getting through to brainwash people. So before we end, just wanted to ask just a couple of quick, hopefully more fun questions. You mentioned that you rescued a blind Westie during COVID, if I heard that correctly on one of your videos. I think his name is Winston. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit of that story.
Well, so I'm a dog person. I've grown up with, 9 or 10 dogs. We had a French bulldog that we got from a breeder who had some serious behavioral disorders, and we had to give him back to the breeder. And I wanted another dog, but I was not going to go back to a breeder to get a pure breed because I have not had good experiences. So we put ourselves on a waiting list, and we ended up getting, as a puppy, from a good breeder. The dog was just born with something called lenticonus lentiglobus, and basically blind. We have a paralyzed puggle as well, who's paralyzed in the back leg. So we're able to deal with these types of inconvenient pets, so to speak. Like they pee on the house, and they're a little harder to deal with, but it doesn't bother us, and we love them. And so we got this dog to keep the other one company, and his name is Winston, named after my favorite bull mastiff that I had when I was a kid, and the main protagonist from 1984, because we are definitely living through 1984 times these days.
Wow. That's great. I mean, not the living through 1984, but where you got the names from. So I got to ask this one because us Northerners, crypto will frequently send us videos of the iguanas down there. And I know that you recently moved to Florida. I think a lot of conservatives were cheering that move. Are you seeing a lot of iguanas down there?
It's nuts. The iguanas now have become like the squirrels up northeast.
Wow.
And they're monstrous. Oh, say it again. Hold on. I'll say they're monstrous. They're everywhere. But there's iguanas, there's lizards. I went jogging yesterday. I saw a deer. I saw an iguana that was easily twice the size of my dog. The other day, I saw an alligator. I was walking up to an iguana that was by one of these ponds, and I didn't notice a 6-foot alligator behind it. The alligator gets scared off and runs into the water. This place is like, Florida is like the Australia of North America. Snakes, iguana, everything. It's magnificent.
So the iguanas, would you say those are worse than the FBI infestation, or?
Well, they're not native to the land, so there are many jokes in there. No, the iguanas they're phenomenally beautiful. They're everywhere. You see them getting run over on the streets, unfortunately. But no, the wildlife here is beautiful. I saw an egret eating a fish. You see the herons looking to hunt for frogs. It's other than the fact that it's a little hot during the day. It's just, Florida is immensely beautiful. A little flat, could use some mountains. I'll probably miss winter, but right now the novelty of this wildlife is really just blowing my mind.
Hey, Viva, I just really is just starting to immerse myself in your work. I jumped on YouTube and I see you're a big fisherman. I also am a big fisherman, also a YouTuber, right? And you got incredible numbers. You're killing it. Many of your videos have over a million or a few million. You have more than 500,000 followers or subscribers. I think that's incredible. But the one video that I had to look at and I had to watch was you 5 years ago catching that very large smallmouth bass with your drone with a jitterbug. And people, that's a topwater lure. You did incredible. It was a big fish. Your excitement, I could feel it because I'm a fisherman. And you were out of breath. You ran all the way across the yard. But just tell us about the YouTube, channel. But definitely tell us about fishing.
Well, so a number of videos have like well over 1 million views, but those were like back in the day when videos could go organically viral. And now I've focused on law stuff. So I don't get really 1 million views on the law stuff, but you get a lot. But it doesn't matter. The views are not the issue. It's about having getting purpose out of the product, but out of what I produce. But that video, it's a top 5 moment of my life. Like I've had kids, and I caught a bass on a drone.
You were so excited, so out of breath. Would you cover about 100 yards, and you're screaming? Is that your wife, your girlfriend? You're screaming for her?
No, I had been doing that with the drone for like 20 minutes at a time for days on end. I didn't think it was possible, and I mean, everything worked. I got the angle. The fish was jumping out of the water. It was the most exhilarating moment of my life. And this was up in Canada, where next to my mother-in-law's place. A relative lives next door, and she heard me screaming, and she thought it was something bad. And she came running out of the shower in a towel, said, "What's happening?" And I'm running up there like an absolute maniac with a GoPro on my head, a smallmouth bass in my hands, running up to the house to show my wife like a 10-year-old kid. And then I ran back and put it in the water. Top 5 moments of my life. It's called drone bass fishing for anyone watching. Put that in the search engine and you'll find it.
That's awesome, Viva. So we are going to wrap up, but as we do, just one quick advice from one Floridian to another. The iguanas, because I keep on sending Mark and Julia all of the videos that I have at work and then just at my house and where they are, and they're massive. And you do know, though, that when it does get a little cooler here, we'll have like 2 days of winter, right? So like for 2 days, it'll be 65. But when it does, when we have those 2 days, the iguanas will fall out of the trees. So when you go jogging, make sure you're not getting those 10-pounders on you.
I'm waiting for that to happen, not so I can take pleasure in the discomfort to the animal. I'm going to record that, and that video is going to go viral. I've got it planned in my head already.
Oh, God. Yes, I could absolutely see it happening. So, Viva, want to thank you so much. We're going to close out, and we're going to give the last minute to you. For people that don't follow you on Twitter or on YouTube, where can they find you? And, just an absolute pleasure. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much. So platforms are all Viva Frei, VIVAFREI, YouTube, Rumble, Instagram for highlights. On Twitter, it's a bit of a sassier Viva Frei. It's the Viva Frei. And it's a little, I would say harsher tone, but it's a little more direct just because we have limited characters, with which to get the message across. And Robert Barnes and I do the weekly, bi-weekly live streams and much more than that. But we have a community on Locals called vivabarneslaw.locals.com. It's a great community. So those are the places where you can find me. And for everything else, just stay vigilant, stay civil, and keep paying attention to what's going on around us.
Indeed. David, thank you so much. Have a great night, sir, and we will see you online soon.
Thank you very much.
Have a great night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up, and I'm going to merge the two and get working on the editing. So I will talk to everyone in a little bit. For those that came in the live cast, thank you so much. It was great seeing you. And for Podbean, if you're listening, you guys suck. I don't know why you give me issues, but you give me issues every time.